Hello, everyone. Welcome to Art of the Bay Sessions. Before we get into the interview, make sure you hit that subscribe button to catch future episodes and other fun content. Now let's jump into the interview. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you so much again, Jess Thomas, for joining us at Art of the Bay. Welcome. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I just want to thank you again for taking the time. And Jess Thomas, I secretly looked up your LinkedIn again just to make sure it was official, and I had it where it's Jess Thomas, illustrator, full stack software
developer, and full-time bird is what
I saw officially on your LinkedIn profile. So
is that what it's?
I'm pretty sure.
Bird.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the official title that you have on there. So
I've stopped getting recruiter messages, so that's nice.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time, and also you've been doing an amazing job with your new podcast series,
it's Art Horse, and of course your
original comic strips with Birdstrips. The first question I actually was going to ask you is what were some of your art influences growing up?
That's a good question. I mean, I grew up in a small town where actually I am right now, hanging out with my parents during the pandemic. But I guess there wasn't really internet. There may have been internet in the world, but we didn't really have it. And so I guess my art influences were in my high school classes, my high school art teacher, and that was kind of it. And then my parents who would buy me art supplies for Christmas and paint by numbers and stuff and paints, and they were really supportive in that sense. And so I'm not sure that there was anybody. I really listened to a lot of music, I guess in that way that was a really big influence. But in terms of the kind of art that I do and visual art, I think there was just a lot of making. Oh wait, except there was this one book which I've talked about before in other places, and it was my favorite book ever when I was a kid. It's called The Art of Painting Animals on Rocks.
Oh, okay.
And I can't remember the author. I should have looked it up because I didn't know I was going to bring it up again. But it's this beautiful book of just this woman who's just painted animals on rocks,
right.
Lots and lots and lots, cats and raccoons and snakes and frogs, and it's just man, it's unbelievable. So I had a lot of fun with that book.
Yeah. Do you still have it?
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Yes. Oh yeah. Hold on to it. It's good. I think she wrote more than one book too. I've actually, for one of my bird strips, I painted an owl on a rock, based on one that was in her book, and so. An homage to, someone who really inspired me as a kid. It just felt magical. I think books were a huge source of inspiration. Yeah. And I also loved, there's some picture books or books that just instill in you this sense of magic. And for me, I don't know if this was big in the States, but for me particularly, I Spy books. So, it was this. Yeah, with the beautiful pictures, every page is different. There's a rhyme at the bottom and you have to find all the things. I just was so enchanted by that. So I don't know if that was an artistic influence, but it was a pretty big influence.
Yeah.
A general influence.
I love those books. I remember them very specifically from elementary school. And I think it was one of those things where it was the same thing. Our teachers had I don't know how many they had. I know there was a series of them, and same thing. I would remember going through them and Where's Waldo and just all these other books.
Yeah.
And just same thing. I think as a kid, for me, those were my original art references, along with Goosebumps and all these other covers.
Totally.
That's awesome that you also were super into those books as well.
Yeah, it's books, man. It's books.
You mentioned music earlier.
Yeah.
What were those influences?
Like, I feel like when I was like a young teenager, Avril Lavigne and that kind of like angsty teen stuff, but then like I started to really love Rise Against and like sort of more like I really liked My Chemical Romance for a while, like that kind of stuff. And I don't know, I guess broody alternative rock.
Yeah.
Green Day was in there. I always had my headphones. Like I loved it so much.
Yeah. Was this on CDs or like the iPad? Like, what are they called? Like
an MP3 player? Yeah, like I had an off-brand. And there wasn't a such thing as off-brand because there wasn't like the main market leader now, I guess, which is Apple and iPad. But it was just like a little square box, and you could change the colors of the LCD display.
Yeah.
I don't even, you know what? I don't know I don't want to say LCD because I don't even know what it is, but it was just so you could change the colors and stuff, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
And like I couldn't get a new one because every time I had it for years and years and years, and every time it broke, my dad would like fix it. So I had an MP3, also burned a lot of CDs.
Right.
Like a lot of CDs.
Yeah.
That was a big moment.
Yeah.
Like the moment when you realize you can like download music.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. That was a turning point.
Yeah. I think I went through the exact same feeling of like my dad collects thousands of CDs because he was under like the Columbia House catalog where he just like ordered a bunch of CDs.
Wow.
And, same thing. I had burned a bunch of them. I made mixtapes. And then once, like the first like MP3 kind of came out, I was like, are you kidding me? Like I can put all these in one spot.
Oh my God. And it's not going to get scratched. It's not going to skip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The anti-skip that never worked on like this on the CD players. Those are the revolutionary days that I miss, but I think we're all kind of like spoiled based on like how much access we have to now. But yeah.
Totally.
Good trip down memory lane.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, like you and I first met at change.org, but for folks who are probably just getting familiar with your work, would you mind giving us kind of like a timeline of like your art career so far?
Oh yeah, sure. So we worked together at change.org. Mm-hmm. I got laid off.
The dark days.
Cool. No, totally. It's cool. I'm fine.
Yeah.
And then I worked at another company and they got laid off again. And I was like, this is it. Like, I'm ready. I've kind of never been super happy as a programmer. Like, it's a pretty cool job and it's like, it's interesting in its own right. But I never felt like I was like using my full self. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm very relationship driven and I don't know, that kind of stuff. So I felt like I had felt for a long time that I was suited for a different career.
Right.
And so my partner and I, we bought one-way tickets out of the country and we sold all our stuff and we moved into backpacks. And about a month in, I was like, I need something to do. Like, this isn't, like I thought it would be like this big, like, vacation, like time of my life, like that I would suddenly every problem that I ever had would be just solved and that I would come into a new country and like make all these new friends and stuff. But actually it was like pretty lonely. Like when you uproot from a community and like leave all your friends behind, and we didn't really have any roots because we totally moved out of our apartment.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
And we didn't know where we were going to live next. Yeah. And so I was wondering like what I could do to like practice every day, practice something, anything. Like I needed something because my partner was like working. Yeah. And I was just sitting across the room, like staring at him, waiting for him to be done. So I started drawing a bird a day. Yeah. And I was like, oh, like maybe I'll get better at drawing birds and maybe I'll get better at like handwriting or something. And then I just never stopped. And so I just had the 1,000th day of Birdstrips and I'm officially taking a break. Right. But during those 1,000 days, it was like a bird a day. There was comics, there was illustrations, there was chainsaw carving, rock painting. There was all kinds of things. And it just felt like a very sort of abundant way to live.
Yeah.
Like learning to like trust my own taste again. And
Right.
yeah. So that's, I guess, a brief history.
Yeah. No, that's like, I think I was talking to you probably last year when we last met up, where it's just amazing to see like your journey throughout everything. When we were working at Change. And I think the brief time that you were over in the States when we had like that weird outing that totally didn't pay off with anything. But overall, like I think that's where like I had seen that you were already, even back then, just going into your own world and doing these doodles. And I was like, that's awesome, because like you definitely seem like you already had a passion for just the art form of just either creating or with ideas and sketches that once you first told me that you were going to start going into like doing these bird sketches, I was like, dude, I totally back you 100%, because like, I remember those moments when we first met that you just were like full on and committed to doing those sketches.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting that like sometimes we don't realize what like is, I don't want to say special because that sounds not quite right, but like what's unique about ourselves.
Right.
Like I think drawing has always been a really big part of, like, it's always been very close to my heart, I guess. But like I have a friend who's like every night before she goes to sleep, she's like writing a book in her head. Wow. I'm like, girl, listen, like write it down. Like, like I don't do that. Not everyone is like that. I think there's things that we don't maybe listen to ourselves about always.
Right.
Like we don't acknowledge or notice that that's actually a really special thing.
Right.
So that's what drawing, I guess, turned out to be.
Yeah. And I think it's very similar to like our friend Anne. Like I think she kind of went through the opposite experience, where she had been studying to become a lawyer and did it for a few and just didn't have the passion for it, but then transitioned into becoming a developer.
Oh yeah.
And it's interesting like how we all kind of go through those journeys of like, was it really the path that we were meant to do, or
totally
on the other end, was there already like a passion that we already wanted to kind of fulfill in that sense? Yeah.
Like there's this moment where you're like, I guess this is it.
Yeah.
And then you discover something new and you're like, no, this is it.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like you kind of need that first moment to be able to recognize the second moment.
I feel like in a less dramatic way, I think that's how I am when I'm watching like Netflix, because there's so many options that I'm just like, okay, I can commit to this movie or show, but I want to look through all my options right now before I can. Yeah. Totally the same.
You're like waiting for the one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like I know now that you're transitioned more into doing the podcast series, I just wanted to kind of give you like my feedback, where I was like, I've listened to a few episodes and like it's really amazing, and I can definitely tell that you and Fiona are having like so much fun like, throughout the show. But I guess just the general question is like, what like really inspired the two of you to come up with the podcast in the first place?
That's a good question. I think what was Fiona's idea, and I think she came to me after, because we had started talking a bit about creativity, and she's not writing a book. Actually, I think she might be writing a book in her head every night before she goes to sleep. But like, there was a lot of creative things that she wasn't acting on.
Yeah.
And then she was looking at like what I was doing and being like, how can we mix this together maybe? Or yeah. So it was her quest to add more art into her life and more creativity into her life that like brought us together in that specific way.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah. Like, I think that's what I like about it, is because like the slogan of the podcast is like, it's a silly and serious podcast about creativity and also getting out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I think it was one of the episodes where you had mentioned the importance of having like a creative buddy. So I really took that to heart, because it was kind of the same journey that we had with Grow Canvas Grow. But in I guess the question I had in mind, because I kind of wanted to get your feedback, is like, when it comes to doing like your solo projects, like whether it be Birdstrips or anything else, and then doing a collaborative project like the podcast, what are some of the pros and cons that come with both with doing like a solo project versus doing a collaborative one, and then like the creative buddy helping out in either or?
That's such an interesting question. I think the biggest pro to doing a solo project is like you get to make all of the decisions.
Yeah.
But that's also one of the biggest cons.
Yeah.
Like there's no one to share this burden with you, and also like you are your own limit. Like you are, it's going to get as good as you can make it, and
right.
That's it.
Yeah.
But I think like in a creative project, like there's so much. I mean, speaking of just Art Horse, like there's so much that Fiona brings to Art Horse that like I can't offer, you know?
Yeah.
And also like independently, like solo, we both bring something to it. And then when we mix together, there's like also chemistry, which makes it something that like neither of us could do by ourselves. And like nobody else could do quite the same as we could, because it's just such a, I don't know. I guess that doesn't really answer your question, but I guess creative buddies are so powerful because they can give you that encouragement when you feel not quite good enough.
Right.
They can really get excited. It's nice to have someone else who can get excited about something that you're excited about.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, I don't remember if it was from one of your episodes, but I think you talk about that briefly, where you have that moment where like, when you are working on your own projects, it's good to have like that creative buddy to not necessarily give you like constructive feedback or just in general feedback, but it's more of just like being able to bounce those ideas like from each other. And that's a little bit harder to do when it comes to either family members or spouses that they may not connect with you in that same mentality when it comes to creative projects. But like how you guys mentioned in that podcast, like the creative buddy is definitely like that one or multiple people who you can go to just to kind of, like open up like the discussion, or at least just like bounce an idea off of each other. And it's really important.
I think that's interesting. And I also think like there's something really special about people who are doing things.
Yeah.
Like making something, and that are familiar with that vulnerability and the risk, and like also the reward. Yeah. And then when you get stuck, like someone who is also doing can be like, oh, what about this?
Yeah.
You know?
No, and like I think you're probably leading this conversation, because I swear that's like the transition I was going to go into.
Maybe you're leading it by leading me to lead you.
No, like it's literally like sheep leading each other. I don't know how
we're just two sheep in a field.
Yeah. But I think that's the best part about the podcast is that the other half of it is that whole aspect of being able to get out of your comfort zone. And I think the two of you do a really good job of handling like those kind of crucial conversations that a lot of people don't really bring up. And I think that's important to talk about as well when you talk about like childhood memories, or just like any creative struggles, or even any family differences, that those are the topics that I think we don't get enough about, like when we see certain process, like when artists or even anyone in the creative field, like they kind of like don't put a spotlight on that, but you guys really do a good job of doing, probably in my opinion anyway, like 50-50, where you do talk about the creative parts about all your art projects, but you also cover the other 50%, which is that struggle. Like I think the one in one of your recent episodes really did a good like observation.
What are you about to say?
To me, like, because I'll say it because like I've gone through it, where when like that thing where like you can't make like a birthday party. It's one of those things where you, I think when you mentioned that, I was like, yeah, like it's one of those guilt factors, because as we get older, it's like, you have your priorities, and like, of course you don't want to let other people down from like what is important to them, but you do kind of have to make like those crucial decisions sometimes. And I think the way that you handle those on the podcast, like give you a real life example of like dealing with those crucial conversations. But I guess what I was trying to lead with that, I went down like a rabbit hole.
Well, I think like the birthday thing was like Like, I sometimes think I'm so important that like if I miss someone's birthday party, I'll ruin it.
Yeah.
And that's like, come on, it's totally, your birthday is about me.
Yeah.
You know?
But I think that's literally the thought a lot of people have had, where like you're either
So
focused
real.
on something else in your life that, of course, you want to commit to what you've already promised, but at the same time, like there is like a conflict where in some cases, it's best to like stay with the commitment, but in some cases, like, you do have to like trust yourself and fulfill yourself as well. So it's
that's a big one.
Yeah. So I think with those, like, what I like about those conversations is they do sound, of course, 100% genuine, and like I really appreciate your honesty with the conversations you and Fiona have. I guess for us as listeners, like, is it more of a mind state, like once you start going there, that you feel that same comfortability, or is it hard to kind of like open up the way that you do when
like to get into those topics of
right
those really uncomfortable things?
Yeah.
I think it's kind of funny because it's really easy, because it's like, Fiona, like, come on, it's easy to talk to Fiona. But like it's harder when I look like in a brief moment where I'm like, oh my God, like someone else is listening.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
But no, I think it's really good, and I think I'm getting better at talking about it, especially things like jealousy, which is a really interesting one, because I've been like, we're both working. I finished The Artist's Way, and she's working through it now, but it's a program by Julia Cameron. It's like a 12-week book where you go through and you read the things and then you do the tasks, and it's about bringing back, I think it's like recovering and discovering creativity or something. And it's like, it's basically therapy in a book.
Right.
But one of the really interesting things that she says is like, jealousy is a map to things that you want. And so now, I think we just talked about this in like the other day, so it's about to come out tomorrow. But I've been getting better at like naming the things I'm jealous of, because now I know like it's not shameful to be jealous of something. It's actually important. It's like a compass.
Okay.
And so I don't know. I think I've maybe been like learning more about myself, and it gets easier to talk about it all the time. I don't know. And also like getting good feedback really is encouraging. Like some things that I find like really embarrassing, if someone's like, oh yeah, like that really is me too. You know, like, yeah.
Yeah. I know the two of you bring up that book a lot during the podcast. I was going to ask you, like, would you recommend that to like any new or upcoming artists to kind of like use that as a blueprint to like see if it is something you're passionate about doing?
I would recommend it to anybody who's ever wanted to do anything.
Yeah.
It's like, it's really interesting. Like she asks a lot of questions like, what are 5 things you liked about yourself as a child?
Oh, wow.
Like, it's kind of like it's really like therapy without having to like go to the therapist.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it's like, it helped me. Like one thing that it gave me that I thought was really interesting is that now I find it easier to get excited about stuff and like follow through with ideas, even if I'm not going to end up doing them.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know, that maybe is out of context and doesn't make any sense. But I think the best part about it is that it's like custom to everybody, because everyone's going to have different answers to those questions, right? Or like, what are like 5 other lives that you haven't lived? They're supposed to be fun, like 5 jobs, I guess, 5 careers.
Yeah.
Or like, lots of really interesting questions.
Right.
And I think like what it helps you do is like have better access to your creativity, maybe.
No, it definitely seems like it gives you kind of like, it's kind of like the word puzzles of like your creativity, where like it kind of gives you like clues on like what you need to fill out, but it's up to you like what you actually fill out. So so that's how I interpreted it, and like I really love like how the two of you are pretty much sticking by it, and it's really good conversation.
Really hard. I'm glad. Yeah, it's so good. Like, and that book, like I started doing it and then I bought it for 5 people that I knew and I just sent it to them in the mail.
Oh,
And so it's like now all these people are stuck with this book. And
they're like, yes, I've read it.
Yeah, but it's like you can tell if someone has read it or not. Because one thing you have to do is you have to write 3 longhand pages every morning.
Oh, wow.
The whole thing. Yeah. But it's so good. It's so good. I would definitely recommend it for anybody.
Yeah. I'll definitely make sure to put like a link wherever we put this out. Like,
Julia Cameron is probably already a millionaire, and here she is having some more.
We're just adding more to her collection plate.
Yeah.
Cool. So speaking of like just going into these other avenues, like what are some of your hobbies when you're not working on art, or I guess in this case producing the podcast?
That's a new one. The podcast is new. I guess it's been three months. Mm-hmm. For a podcast, which is maybe it's still new, but it's also not new. That's funny.
Yeah.
Didn't realize that. I guess like before the pandemic, I was learning tap dance, and that was really fun.
Yeah.
But now I'm at my parents' place for the last 5 months. So, no tap dance here. I love music. I love dance. I don't know. I really like trying new things, and I'm really an opportunist, I think, when it comes to hobbies. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I did roller derby for a while, and I loved it. I did rock climbing for a while, and I loved it. I guess going forward, I'd like to be maybe more active, and I love cooking. I love everything, basically. Yeah. There are a few things that I don't love.
Yeah. So pretty much what you're telling me is that for your next adventure will be kind of combining all of them in the sense where you're casting, roller derby, like everything.
Yeah.
You can just make an entire industry from that.
Yeah, it's all about being a one-man band and skating around the stage, and man, beautiful. Yeah, I don't even know what could be next. Yeah. Could be anything. That's the thing about being an opportunist, is you never see it coming.
That's true. That's very true. So I guess for people who are just getting familiar with the podcast, how did you and Fiona actually meet in the first place?
We met when my partner and I first moved to Montreal, and we were looking for a place to live. Mm-hmm. And it was totally I don't know if the word is serendipitous.
Yeah.
I was really excited about this apartment, and they were walking there, and we get this text that say the apartment is taken, and I'm in the street going, no! It's this whole thing. And then I find a sublet ad, and I send her a message, and she's like, yeah, sure. My sublet just fell through.
Oh, okay.
And so I went to go check it out, and then she was this is not really relevant, but her rabbit sitter also fell through. So I lived in her apartment while she was gone for 4 months with her rabbit. And yeah, I don't know what it is. I guess we started to talk more, and then became friends because we lived really close together. And so, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I blacked that part out, but at some point it became, she's a real one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's always interesting because I think I asked myself that the other day, where when my friends and I initially met, and it's one of those hazy memories. Whenever you try to think about it, it's always you remember some things here and there, but you can't think of the exact reason of what caused the friendship to happen. Mm-hmm. I think it's always interesting. The people that we of course care about the most, it's hard to remember those key details.
When did I start caring this much?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting because over time it's you make little bids towards friendship, I guess. You make investments, I guess, in friendship.
Yeah.
I feel the first time that you go over to someone's house,
right,
is that's a big move.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's interesting because as kids you don't really think about it that much, because I remember when I would go visit friends, when I'm 8 or 10, it's no big deal. You just go over to their house and play or whatever. But as you get older, you're oh wow, okay, now, yeah, we are getting to like another point of like, okay, I'm actually going to this person's house now. It's like, it's a
like I have a bigger mental picture of where they live and like where like of them and their world. It's kind of interesting.
That's a journey in itself.
Yeah.
So I definitely want to make sure that I do your loyal supporters a justice by asking you, of course, some Birdstrip questions. Like,
okay.
I wanted to make sure, like, for those that did tune in specifically for that I didn't do them a crime or injustice. So I'm pretty sure you've gotten similar questions before of like, what's your favorite bird and your favorite strip and everything. But I think in the one that I've always wanted to ask you is like, throughout all of the 1,000 drawings that you've done so far, has there been like a favorite art style that you've done? Because I've seen you do, of course, different things from traditional watercolor, markers, digital painting, and of course even cake form, which is my personal favorite, really.
Right. Yeah. That was a good cake.
Yeah. But yeah, I just wanted to see like if you had any preference in doing these different art styles.
That's a really interesting question that no one has ever asked me. So here's the scoop.
Exclusive.
Yeah, I guess like I really have tried a lot of stuff, like all different kinds of painting and also like digital art and I think like my answer feels clear to me because I remember when I was doing digital art for a while, like I was on vacation or something and I was like, I'm not going to lug around all this paper anymore. I'm not going to bring all my stuff. I'm just bringing my, the bare minimum. And then when I got home and I got to like paint with real paintbrushes again, like watercolor and like ink, it felt so good. Like there's something that like, it's so much easier for me to get in flow with the paintbrush than it is to do digitally. And maybe I was just never that competent at it. Maybe that was a problem, but like, there's something really special about watercolor paint, I think, and ink. And I think it's interesting, like I'm looking back through all my Birdstrips right now because I'm trying to like think of like what could possibly go into a book. And it's so interesting to see the way like my earlier drawings had a lot of pencil in them and I like didn't like erase them. And it's interesting to see how the process has changed over 1,000 days. And like the things that you may focus more on are like, what a strange thing to practice.
Yeah.
Like now I can draw a bird, like now what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that's amazing because I'm pretty sure every artist has kind of gone through that struggle of like when you first pick up like a new skill set or like, in this case, like watercolor where you start off like maybe not comfortable, like either with the paints themselves or the paper, but in time, it's just like anything else. Like the more you practice it, the more you'll get in your groove and like what you feel most comfortable doing it at that point.
Totally. And I would have thought that like doing something for 1,000 days would make me like more comfortable with being uncomfortable, but I don't know if that's true because like lately what I want to do the most, like in my heart, it's like to draw like autobiographical comics with like pen and ink. But like when I try to make marks on the paper, I like can't. Like I'm so blocked. And so like what I've been doing is like, okay, I'm going to set a timer for 3 minutes. I'm going to divide this cue card into 2 pieces and then I'm going to do 3 minutes per each spot. And then I'm just going to put it away. I'm not going to look at it again.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's working. That was like today. But it's funny that it doesn't really get that much as much easier as I thought. Like you just get new problems.
Right.
We used to have different problems.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me like as a boxer, like I'm not saying that I've boxed or I'm just saying, like what you just kind of mentioned.
From my perspective.
From my perspective. It reminds me of like the mentality of a boxer. Like it's never going to get easier. Like the punches are always going to be harder or whatever, but you do find like your groove after a while, like getting your posture and just like your stamina. It's going to get better the more fights you have. So it's kind of like the same thing of like, it may not get easier as far as like what you're making, but like, you do find like your groove and your comfortability after a point. So now the one that I've always been dying to know, because I think part of the charm of Birdstrips is the humor, and
Okay.
I really want to know like what has been like more of your comedic influences, because I think like that also like has to factor in some way, unless you're just like a naturally funny human being that's never seen any comedies ever. But like to me, that's the charm, that I really like the comedic sense in a lot of the Birdstrips.
Thank you. I think like I don't know, like I don't watch a lot of movies or TV, but I think just coming to try to sit down and come up with a joke is hard.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all have our own sense of like what we think is funny. Like fart jokes get me almost every time. Like I'm looking, and there's also, because I've just looked through 1,000 Birdstrips, like there are so many that are not funny. Or that like the joke wasn't quite perfectly crafted, or like the things are in the wrong place, or like I don't know. But I think, I don't know, that's part of like learning, is like seeing what people laugh at, or like even like just doing something and being like, that's going to have to be good enough because it's bedtime.
Right.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I remember like at the very start, this isn't the answer to the question that you asked. I don't really have an answer in terms of like comedic influences, but in terms of like trying to figure out how the heck to write a joke.
Right.
Like, I think I started trying to be really funny. Like I really try, like the first like probably 10 are like, I really tried to make a joke, and I would think like, well, okay, I have to come up with a joke. And then I started to like, just try to tell stories, and like, then sometimes a joke would like float along in the breeze and I would breathe it in.
Yeah.
Like,
Cause I think it's just like, like a actual comedian where they like, I talked to one of my best friends about this, because we really love comedy, and like we think it's like an underrated form of art and entertainment in itself, because like for you to succeed, you have to like unfortunately bomb a lot when it comes to the comedy world. So it's the same thing where like you just literally just have to like really just experiment and see like what works and what doesn't.
Totally.
And, like I think it's the same way with like creating artwork. Is that's why we do sketches, but even then, like when we commit to like a dedicated art project, some of them may not be successful, but it's more like you tried it and you just kind of committed to it, and that's all that really matters, is that you actually committed to something. But going now, since we're going into more like the emotional route, I think that's the other part, like these half and half things with your projects, because like the charm of it is the humor, but then there's also like the heart that you do a lot with the strips. And I think this is like the moment where like I'm cutting onions that I don't want to like cry on camera. But I think one of my favorite Birdstrips, I made sure to write it down, was number 701, where it's the bird family, and like just like the parents like raising the bird, and then like saying like I'm okay. Like I think that one was probably one of my favorites, just because like you're able to tell like like how you mentioned like these stories where it's literally just 4 panels, but the way that you're able to put those emotions into paper, and just like based on facial expressions and postures and everything, that like it really got to me, like, and I think it got to like a lot of your supporters too, just because like, we've all been there in some shape, way, or form. And I think that's the beautiful part from your comics, is that there are those moments that people can relate to when it's when it's getting more into like the emotional aspects. And I think the question I had for you in that sense, it's like, when you come up with these, like, is it more just like an emotional state that you're in, or is it like a story that you've always kind of like wanted to tell, and use like the strips as a platform to tell these stories?
That makes me think of something, and I'm worried that I'm going to totally lose my train of thought. I'm just going to write that down just for a second.
No worries.
So I guess a lot of that particular one was like a guest strip for foul language comics because he hurt his shoulder. And so it was like, he asked if a bunch of different comic artists, if they would like do something in his style that he would post as like and so that was really cute. And so that's why they look a little bit different than they usually do.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting story in itself, because that's not something that I think that is so, like, everybody has parents, you know? And so like, that's something that's so relatable, but that's also something that I'm not usually, you know, about to talk about because you know, they read my Instagram. And so like, there's certain things that I would feel that I would have to censor, you know? But I think for the more emotional ones, there was a lot of like depression comics where I really was pretty depressed. So like, they sort of came from a place of trying to find the, not positivity, but like to stay alive, like try to find the light in the lightness, I guess. And I think like the thing that I didn't want to forget, that really the question that resonated with me that you said was about using comics as a platform to tell stories. Yeah. And like, I think with respect to that, there's so many things that I would love to, like, I'm sort of just coming around to it. Like I follow a lot of like diary comic artists that like, they'll draw their day, or they'll draw like some funny thing that happened, or they'll draw like a story of their life and like how they, like, I read one the other day about like figure skating costumes, and I read one about like a girl who didn't have a very good relationship with her mom, and like they sat down to watch a movie about moms and daughters, and the mom was like, "This isn't interesting. I'm going to bed." Yeah. I was like, you hit the nail on the head. That's a good one. But like, I want to write stuff that's true and that's like that somehow, but I like can't get anything out. So I feel like, I guess what I'm realizing is that some things need, it's like a completely different transition of like working from like putting something out every day to like being able to actually workshop an idea and take an idea and like realize that you can shift it and like find the important pieces out of it in more than one day. I don't know. I don't know if that was a cohesive answer, but
no. I think that's valid, because I think that's the beauty of it now. Like, you've done like these amazing comics, and doing them for like 1,000 years or 1,000 years.
Feels like it.
It's basically like you did them for 1,000 years.
Yeah, so it feels like
for 1,000 days. And it's one of those things where I think even for me, when I was in art school, that there's so much that you have to kind of like fulfill based on like either criteria for a classroom, that you're working on something and it may not be exactly like what you want to work on, but you still put in like the aspects that you care about the most. But you also build up a lot of this creative energy that you do want to expand and try out these different avenues and different projects. So I think that's where the beauty of the podcast comes from. And now like the same thing, by taking the break from Birdstrips, it allows you to kind of, like exactly how you mentioned, just like really focus on an idea or a project, and definitely like taking your time with it and also developing it in different ways if it decides to shift like midway at that point. With speaking of shifting and going in those directions, I think we literally went into the full circle aspect where my final question is like, what has been either one of your favorite projects, or like either your favorite project or multiple projects that it doesn't necessarily even have to be Birdstrips. It could just be anything that you've loved working on in the last few years.
I mean, I'm really proud of Birdstrips. I'm excited for it to turn into something new. I think Art Horse is something that I've always wanted. Like, it's almost something that I always wanted Birdstrips to be, but could never be, because that doesn't make any sense. So it's like, it feels like it's exactly the thing that I want to be doing, which is I've always been really passionate about inspiring people to do art and to like find their creativity and to do whatever it is that they are like stuck about or wanting to do, because I am stuck and wanting to do and I can't, and it's hard. And I think like the cool thing about Art Horse is it's like this stage for me to like try out things. It's like a funny excuse to try things, and it's really exciting. So I really like that. But when I read your question, the first thing that came to my mind was there was this really interesting project. I've never done anything like it before, but it was like probably, I don't know, 5 years ago or something. There was a friend of mine was organized this like super secret project to do this like a timeline of the history of the universe.
Oh, wow.
Under the city, like in a storm drain.
Yeah.
And so like, and he was very like paranoid about like being, you know, anyone finding out. And like, so no one was allowed to talk about it outside of anything. Like no one was allowed to send an email. There was like code words. No one was allowed to text about it. It was this whole thing. And so like everyone had an event and they had to like design a piece for their event.
Yeah.
So like the first flowers, you know, on Earth. And like, so mine was the first, I remember it was like a giant like fish alligator thing. I think it was the first thing with feet maybe, or like legs, or the first thing that went on land. But it was like so interesting because we're just all in this storm drain in our rubber boots with our flashlights and like spray painting on this wall. And there's like all these plaques and like, it's really interesting. It's underneath Victoria, BC, Canada.
Yeah.
Like, but I don't know if it's still there, but I feel like that was a really interesting collective project, the likes of which I've never seen before or since.
Yeah. That is like, that's amazing. Like, I think it's one of those, it's literally one of those things that will stick with you your entire life just because of like how unique it is. I think I've done some similar things where we've just drawn like somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and then it's like you could have done like 1,000 sketches or 1,000 like art projects, but that's the one that's really going to stick with you just because of the uniqueness of everything.
Yeah, totally. Sorry, there's someone digging around in the freezer.
Oh, it's okay. My dogs always like dig throughout the house trying to find food. So
whatever it is that they're looking for.
I'm totally used to it. Well, I just want to say thanks again for joining us on this conversation. I really appreciate it. And of course,
it's been so much fun.
Yeah, I want to give you a huge congrats again with everything, with your success with Birdstrips, and of course now joining your new journey with Art Horse and the podcast. Did you have any plugs that you wanted to mention before we head out?
I guess you can find Birdstrips on Instagram, at Birdstrips, and you can find Art Horse at arthorsepod.com and arthorsepod at Instagram. On Instagram, sorry, my dog just walked in, and he just got a haircut. I don't know if you can see his
he wanted to get the final plug, so that I think that's why.
Yeah, he just had to. Yeah, that's Ben. So yeah, listen to Art Horse and check out Birdstrips. That's it.
It's been approved, so. Yeah,
that's right. Just so you know, it has the paw of approval, the stamp of approval.
I can't think of a better way to end it out than that. So.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Jess.
Yeah, thank you.
Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, you too.
Take care.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks again for watching. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to like and subscribe.